They laughed as they handed me the deed to an empty parking lot. My sister clutched the keys to a sparkling villa, cameras flashing as if she had won the lottery. I stood with asphalt and cracks under my feet, my parents smirking. "You can always sleep under the stars." Their words pierced deeper than any blade. Humiliation burned, yet beneath the shame a spark ignited. They thought they buried me under concrete, but they had no idea. This barren lot wasn't my end. It was the beginning of something they would never see coming. The chandeliers dripped with light, like frozen waterfalls, their golden glow casting a perfect sheen across the Carter Estate's ballroom. Waiters in crisp white uniforms weaved through the crowd, silver trays balanced high, carrying champagne that bubbled like laughter. Tonight was supposed to be a family gathering, or at least that was the excuse my parents gave when they summoned me back. For a fleeting moment, standing among crystal glasses and the chatter of cousins I hadn't seen in years, I almost let myself believe in it, believe in the illusion of family unity. But illusions are fragile things. When Richard Carter raised his glass, the room hushed as though he were royalty. Helen stood beside him, her pearls gleaming, her smile carved in porcelain. "Tonight," my father announced, "we celebrate legacy." The word tasted sharp in the air, like something too grand to touch. He motioned to Victoria, Vicky, my younger sister, glowing in a sequined dress, as though she were the crown jewel of our bloodline. My heart thudded harder. I already knew, somewhere deep down, I had always known. The lawyer stepped forward with 2 envelopes. The first, placed delicately in Vicky's manicured hands, contained the deed to a villa on the lakefront. The crowd erupted in applause, as if they were watching the coronation of a queen. I forced my lips into a tight smile, though my chest tightened. When my turn came, the lawyer handed me a thin slip of paper. No fanfare, no applause, just silence, waiting to see what I would unwrap. I unfolded the document. It was a deed to a parking lot. A cracked, weed-infested strip of asphalt on the edge of town, the kind people drove past without noticing. My parents smirked, Richard raising his brow. "You can always sleep under the stars," Helen quipped, her laughter sharp and rehearsed. The crowd chuckled, not quite knowing if it was a joke or a cruelty. My face burned. The illusion of reunion shattered in that moment. I stood in a room full of people who pretended not to see my humiliation. Vicky kissed the papers to her lips, tilting her phone toward the crowd. "Smile, sis," she teased. The flash blinded me for a second, capturing forever the image of her triumph and my disgrace. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw something darker in Helen's eyes, not just coldness, but calculation. A realization clawed at me. This had never been spontaneous. It was orchestrated, a spectacle designed to place me at the bottom where I belonged. Later, when the champagne dulled the sting for everyone else, Vicky turned her phone toward herself. "Going live," she announced, her voice sugar-coated. I watched her giggle and twirl, showing the villa deed to her hundreds of followers. "And look what Emily got," she said, dragging me into the frame. The camera zoomed in on my slip of paper. The words "parking lot" glared back under the harsh phone light. "She's the starry-eyed dreamer. Literally, she gets to sleep under the stars." Laughter rippled through the room, but it was the echo online that stung deeper. Within minutes, my phone buzzed with notifications. Friends from college, old colleagues, even strangers tagged me in memes, screenshots of me clutching the deed with captions like, "When your parents know you're the family failure." My humiliation had gone global. I wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. I confronted my father, my voice trembling. "Why would you do this?" Richard swirled his whiskey, unbothered. "You're imagining things, Emily. We wanted to test your strength. That lot is an opportunity if you're clever enough to see it." His words, laced with false wisdom, were gaslighting, wrapped in paternal authority. My mother stood silent, her lips pressed so tightly they turned white, but her eyes gave everything away. They weren't proud, they weren't even ashamed, they were satisfied. I excused myself, the noise of celebration dissolving into a dull roar in my ears as I slipped into the empty hallway. My hands shook as I clutched the phone. Every vibration reminded me I was a punchline now, a lifetime of obedience, loyalty, sacrifice, all reduced to a joke in less than an hour. Then the screen lit up again, a message from an unknown number. "That parking lot isn't as useless as you think." My pulse quickened. I glanced back toward the ballroom where Vicky laughed and posed in her glittering crown of entitlement, where Richard and Helen basked in her glow as though they hadn't just shattered their eldest daughter. For the first time that night, something stirred inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something quieter, sharper, like the faint crackle before a storm. The morning after the party, my phone was still buzzing, an endless stream of notifications and cruel comments. I deleted the apps, but the humiliation clung to me like a second skin. At the office, whispers floated across cubicles. Colleagues pretended to talk about news headlines. But I caught the side glances, the smirks they tried to hide. "Isn't she the one with the parking lot?" I overheard someone murmur. Another laughed. "Her sister's villa has a pool bigger than her entire inheritance." I pressed my headphones tighter, but the words bled through. Soon, invitations to family gatherings stopped arriving. Birthdays, anniversaries, even simple Sunday dinners. I was no longer included. Photos of those events littered Vicky's social media. Her laughing in designer dresses, my parents at her side, champagne flutes raised in toast. The captions stung worse than the pictures. "Family means everything," and beneath it, the comments, "Where's Emily?" Followed by endless laughing emojis. At night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, sleep evading me. Every memory of childhood, small moments when I thought I belonged, rose up like cruel ghosts. My father's hand on Vicky's shoulder at her graduation, my mother brushing off my tears with a sharp, "Don't be dramatic." It all came together now, like puzzle pieces I never wanted to see complete. The worst part was Vicky's glee. She leaned into the role of the golden child, turning me into a public punchline. Her videos grew bolder, unboxing gifts, flaunting the villa, throwing parties where she clinked glasses and joked about sleeping under the stars. She printed T-shirts for her friends with little star icons and the phrase, "Emily's Suite." The internet ate it up. I avoided mirrors. I couldn't face the reflection of someone everyone else thought pathetic. One sleepless night, my phone buzzed again. Not with mockery this time, but with another message from the unknown number. Attached was a photograph. It took me a moment to recognize it, the cracked asphalt of my lot, but this time marked on a professional-looking map. Red outlines, arrows, labels I didn't understand. My hands trembled. It wasn't just a lot. It was part of the city's new infrastructure project. My breath caught. Whoever had sent this. How did they know? Why? Show me. I wanted to tell someone, to confide, but who? My parents would laugh, my colleagues would dismiss it, and Vicky would turn it into another punchline. The secret lodged itself inside me, both terrifying and electrifying. Days later, I returned to the Carter estate, summoned by Helen. Her tone over the phone had been clipped. "We need to talk." I half hoped it was an apology, a shred of acknowledgement that the cruelty had gone too far. Instead, when I walked into the drawing room, the air was thick with perfume and disdain. Helen sat with her teacup. Vicky sprawled across the couch, scrolling her phone. Richard didn't bother to look up from his paper. "You've been sulking," Helen said without preamble. "Do you think the world owes you something? We gave you what we thought you could handle." "It wasn't fair," I whispered, though my throat tightened. Helen's laugh was brittle. "Life isn't fair, Emily. You were never meant to shine. You're the shadow that lets Victoria glow brighter. Families need balance, and sometimes that means one child carries the weight so the other can rise. You are that weight. You always have been." Her words sliced clean through whatever defences I'd built. My knees felt weak. Vicky put down her phone long enough to smirk. "Face it, sis. You weren't born to win. You're background noise in a story that isn't yours." The cruelty wasn't new, but the bluntness was. No pretense, no sugarcoating, just truth dripping with venom. For the first time, I considered the unthinkable, slipping away, leaving this world quietly so no one could laugh at me again. The thought scared me as much as it comforted me. That night, back in my small apartment, I spread the map across the table. My eyes traced the lines and symbols, heart racing as realization dawned. The parking lot wasn't worthless, it was prime. The red markings confirmed it. The city planned to develop the surrounding area into a new transit hub, and my barren strip of asphalt sat at the centre like a keystone. The message from the stranger, Helen's confession, Vicky's mockery, it all collided inside me. Maybe they were right about one thing. I wasn't born to shine under their light. But perhaps there was another light waiting. I clutched the map tighter, the paper crinkling under my fists. For the first time in weeks, sleep finally found me, though it wasn't rest, it was fire. The city map lay folded in my bag like a secret too fragile to expose. With it came the first fragile thread of hope I'd felt in weeks. I clung to it, desperate to believe that maybe, just maybe, my parents hadn't buried me completely. Maybe the lot could be more than a humiliation. I scheduled an appointment with the bank, rehearsing a pitch in my head 100 times on the subway ride over. I sat across from the loan officer, a middle-aged man in a grey suit whose smile never reached his eyes. I spread out my notes, the city development map, the rough sketches of what the lot could become. My voice shook at first, but grew steadier as I explained the potential. I poured every drop of my remaining confidence into those words, praying he would see me as more than a meme. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, chuckling under his breath. "You're serious?" "Yes," I said. "I just need the capital to—" He cut me off, shaking his head. "Emily Carter, right? We've seen you online, the parking lot girl. Look, I don't mean to be cruel, but we can't risk money on a joke. You understand, don't you?" His laughter echoed in the small office, louder than it should have been. I gathered my papers with trembling hands, heat flooding my face. As I left, I heard him mutter to his colleague, "She'll never live that down." The shame was unbearable. By the time I stepped onto the street, tears blurred the world into streaks of grey. Days later, a new wound struck. A headline began circulating online. "Carter Heiress sells inheritance to conman." The article claimed I'd sold the parking lot to a fraudster for pennies, painting me as both stupid and desperate. The source was anonymous, but the style was familiar. Vicky. My sister had struck again, twisting the knife where it hurt most. Comment sections filled with laughter, strangers calling me naive, gullible, hopeless. I didn't need to check. My colleagues had seen it too. I stopped answering calls, stopped leaving the apartment. Food tasted like ash, and nights stretched into endless voids. My chest felt heavy, as though every breath was borrowed. For the first time, I began to believe that maybe they were right. Maybe I was nothing more than the family's failure, destined to collapse under the weight of their ridicule. One evening, desperate to escape the suffocating walls, I walked to the lot. It was quiet, only the hum of distant traffic breaking the silence. I sat on the cracked asphalt, the cold seeping through my clothes. The stars blinked faintly overhead, distant and indifferent. I remembered Helen's words, "You're the shadow that lets Victoria glow brighter." I remembered being a child, holding up drawings for her approval, only to be told, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" The memories pressed in, sharp and unrelenting. My chest heaved, tears burning down my cheeks. For a moment, the thought of never getting up again crossed my mind, a tempting release from this relentless humiliation. But then headlights cut across the lot. A black car pulled up, sleek and unfamiliar. My body stiffened as the engine quieted, and a man stepped out. He was tall, dressed in a dark coat, his face shadowed until he came closer. "Emily Carter?" His voice was calm, almost careful. I wiped my eyes, wary. "Who's asking?" He smiled faintly, though not cruelly. "Let's just say, someone who doesn't think you're a joke. I've been following the redevelopment plans. Your lot is positioned at the centre of something very valuable." I blinked at him, the world tilting. "Why would you care?" "Because opportunity often hides in places people laugh at," he said. "And laughter blinds them to the gold beneath their feet." He gestured toward the asphalt. "If you let me, I can help you turn this into more than just cracked concrete, more than they ever imagined." Hope and suspicion warred inside me. Was he real or just another person ready to exploit me? My lips parted, but no words came. That night, I didn't return home. Instead, I lay back on the asphalt, staring at the stars until dawn. The cold bit at my skin, but the quiet wrapped around me like a cocoon. In the darkness, I replayed his words again and again, more than they ever imagined. I saw flashes of another life, a transformed lot filled with lights, voices, possibility. A place that wasn't just survival, but defiance. My heart thudded harder, a rhythm I hadn't felt in weeks. When the man returned at sunrise, he looked down at me with a knowing expression. "If you trust me," he said softly, "we'll turn this parking lot into a diamond. But it starts with you deciding you're worth more than their cruelty." The world stilled. For the first time, I wondered if maybe I was. The man's words echoed for days, threading through my thoughts like an ember refusing to die out. I found myself scouring the internet late into the night, searching for signs of what he meant. That was when I stumbled across a phenomenon sweeping across the country. Luxury smart parking. Tech-driven parking spaces redesigned into mini communities and tiny house villages where people paid premium rates to live in minimalist, eco-friendly homes. Social feeds overflowed with glowing lights strung over compact wooden cabins, rooftop gardens on shipping containers, and travellers boasting about glamping under the stars. I stared at the screen, my chest tight. They had mocked me with those very words, sleep under the stars. But here it was, turned into profit, status, even envy. My humiliation could become my weapon. The anger boiled up inside me, scolding and righteous. All the years of being silenced, mocked, diminished, it surged into one clear thought. This parking lot will be my empire. This will be the stone that crushes their illusion of victory. Fueled by that anger, I began sketching ideas. Solar panels across rooftops, smart parking sensors to maximize space, tiny houses designed with glass walls so guests could wake to the sunrise. The vision grew wilder, sharper, until it pulsed through my veins like electricity. But I couldn't do it alone. On a whim, I joined an online support group for survivors of toxic families. I expected pity. Instead, I found resilience. Dozens of strangers shared their stories. Parents who had abandoned them, siblings who had stolen inheritances, entire lives shaped by betrayal. For the first time in years, I felt less alone. They didn't just understand, they validated me. Their encouragement became fuel. "You're not broken," one message read. "You're forged. Use the fire." And I knew I would. I returned to the lot with a notebook, sketching until the sun dipped low. The asphalt no longer looked like cracked concrete. It looked like the foundation of defiance. I pressed my palm to the ground and whispered, "I'll show them. I'll burn their illusions with the fire they tried to smother." That night, I opened my laptop and began drafting a campaign. I called it From Parking Lot to Paradise. I filmed myself standing in the middle of the desolate strip, speaking straight into the camera. They said I could sleep under the stars. What they didn't know is that I'll build a world beneath them, a world of light, freedom, and community. If you've ever been told you're not enough, this project is for you. I hit upload and waited. The next morning, my phone buzzed relentlessly. The video spread like wildfire. Comment sections overflowed with support. This is the kind of story we need right now. From humiliation to innovation, absolutely inspiring. Donations trickled in, then poured. People bought into the vision, not just because of the idea, but because they saw themselves in me, the overlooked, the underestimated. The campaign went viral. News outlets picked it up, calling me the heiress who turned humiliation into hope. The parking lot became a symbol, a rallying cry for anyone who had been dismissed. Construction crews volunteered time. Architects offered designs at reduced costs. Containers were delivered, painted bright colours, transformed into tiny homes. One evening, as I stood in the first finished unit, a simple steel container lined with pine wood, I sat on the floor and cried. Not from sadness, but from the unfamiliar weight of freedom. For the first time, the air didn't feel like chains around my throat. I pressed my hand to the cool wall and whispered to the empty space, "This is mine. Finally, something that is mine." Outside, fairy lights twinkled above the growing village. Strangers walked the lot with curiosity, their voices rising with excitement about what was coming. I stood among them not as the Carter failure, but as Emily, the builder, the visionary, the survivor, but victories rarely go unchallenged. A week later, I received a letter delivered by courier. The Carter family crest, stamped in gold, mocked me from the envelope. I tore it open, my hands trembling. Inside was a legal notice. Victoria Carter versus Emily Carter. My sister had filed a lawsuit claiming I had no right to develop the lot, that it was joint property, and I was exploiting family assets without consent. My blood ran cold. She hadn't just mocked me now, she was coming for everything. I looked back at the glowing lights of my project, at the laughter of strangers building something real with me, and my jaw hardened. "This parking lot will bury their villa," I whispered. One way or another. The lawsuit might have slowed me down, but it did something else instead. It gave me a microphone. Suddenly, reporters were circling the lot, their cameras pointed at the steel cabins, the fairy lights, and me. At first, I hesitated. Years of silence had taught me to keep my pain locked away. But when the microphones came closer, I realized this was my chance to reclaim my voice. So I spoke. I told them about the night of the inheritance, how my parents had handed my sister a mansion and me a cracked strip of asphalt. I told them about the laughter, the ridicule, the way they'd told me I could sleep under the stars. The reporters leaned in, hungry for every detail. I didn't embellish, I didn't need to. The raw truth was enough. The story caught fire. From disinherited to innovator, headlined the local paper. National outlets followed. Strangers online declared me the embodiment of resilience. Bookings for the tiny houses doubled overnight. Investors reached out with offers. For the first time, I felt the tide turning, not just for my project, but for me. But the Carter family was not ready to let me go quietly. Vicky, furious at seeing my face plastered across every newsfeed, lashed out in the only way she knew how. She hired 2 men to sabotage the lot. One night, while guests were asleep in their tiny houses, they crept in with tools, cutting through wires, disabling generators. The entire place was plunged into sudden darkness. The laughter and chatter outside snuffed out into fearful murmurs. I rushed across the grounds, flashlight in hand, heart pounding as I checked each cabin. Guests stumbled out, confused and unsettled. My worst fear bloomed that this fragile dream would collapse under sabotage before it even found its footing. But when the lights finally flickered back on, I checked the security cameras. Every movement of the saboteurs was recorded in crystal clarity. And at the edge of the frame, unmistakable in her arrogance, stood Vicky. She had been foolish enough to supervise her own crime. I stared at the footage, equal parts horrified and relieved. For the first time, I had undeniable proof, not of whispers, not of humiliation, but of deliberate destruction. My sister had declared war, and I had caught her red-handed. The next morning, I called a press conference. Reporters swarmed, eager for the next chapter of the Carter family drama. I stood before them, hands steady this time, and played the footage on a massive screen. Gasps rippled through the crowd as they watched Victoria Carter, the so-called golden daughter, direct men to cut power to her sister's business. While I worked to build something from nothing, I told them, My own sister tried to tear it down, and she wasn't alone. The fallout was immediate. Sponsors pulled their support from Vicky's public ventures. The villa, already strained by her reckless spending, fell into foreclosure. Paparazzi captured her being escorted out, screaming at the press, her once pristine image reduced to shambles. But the greater shock came days later. Buried in old documents I'd retrieved for the lawsuit, I found a letter, an unsigned note tucked into the margins of my father's files. It detailed an early draft of the inheritance plan. The villa had originally been assigned to me, but at the last moment, Richard and Helen had changed it, giving it to Vicky instead. In a scrawled margin note, one line explained everything. Emily too independent, Victoria easier to guide. My chest hollowed out as I read it. It had never been about merit, never about fairness. They had chosen her because she was easier to control. I wasn't discarded for being weak. I was discarded for being strong. When I confronted them with the letter, Helen's face remained stone, Richard's voice brittle. You were never meant to lead, Emily. We did what was best for the family. I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. Best for the family? You didn't just betray me. You betrayed all of us. You traded love for convenience, and now you've lost everything. The media devoured the revelation. Overnight, Richard and Helen Carter, once pillars of community respect, became symbols of parental favoritism and corruption. Neighbours whispered, business partners withdrew. They weren't just losing their reputation, they were losing the very illusion of power they had clung to for decades. That night, alone in the quiet of my office overlooking the glowing village, I whispered to myself, they didn't only betray me, they betrayed their own family. The words hung heavy in the air, not bitter this time, but resolute. Because I finally understood. Their betrayal no longer defined me. It condemned them. The parking lot was no longer just a patch of asphalt. It had become a beacon. Word spread quickly about the Paradise Project, and within months, demand outgrew the single lot. Investors approached with proposals, and for the first time in my life, I chose carefully. No longer desperate, no longer begging for scraps, I built on my own terms. Soon, the second location opened in Denver, then Seattle, then Miami. Each one a gleaming pocket of light where strangers came together not just to park cars or rent tiny homes, but to feel they belonged. What had started as mockery had become a movement. Articles described me as the woman who had turned pain into power. Talk shows invited me to speak about resilience. People who had laughed at me before now lined up with business cards, begging for collaboration. Some of them were the same colleagues who once whispered in the office. Some were neighbours who had shared Vicky's videos with glee. I didn't gloat. I listened politely, declined when I wanted, accepted when it served my vision. The difference was, this time, I held the power. One evening, as another location prepared to launch, I sat alone in my office with a notebook. The lights outside shimmered across a city skyline. But I turned my focus inward. On the first page, I wrote a letter to myself. The little girl who once clutched drawings no one praised. The teenager who cried quietly in her room. The young woman who stood humiliated at that inheritance party. Dear Emily, you survived. You endured every cruelty, every betrayal, and still you stand. They told you that you were only a shadow, but you were always the flame. This is your proof. You lived and you thrived. You are free. Tears blurred the words, but they weren't the tears of despair anymore. They were release, acknowledgement, and peace. I closed the notebook gently, as though tucking my younger self into bed with comfort she had never been given. In the months that followed, Vicky tried to reach me. First through emails, long, desperate apologies tangled with excuses. Then through lawyers, pleading for financial help as the foreclosure of the villa left her adrift. Finally, through voicemails, her voice raw and broken. "Emily, you don't understand, I need you, please." I listened once, just once. And then I pressed delete, not out of cruelty, but clarity. Helping her would only bind me again to the chains I had broken. I didn't need revenge. My victory was survival, freedom, and the empire built from what they called worthless. Richard and Helen remained silent. Publicly disgraced, they retreated into the confines of their estate, their names now whispered with scorn instead of respect. Whether they regretted their choices, I couldn't know. And maybe I didn't care anymore. Their silence no longer had the power to wound me. Instead, I chose my own family. The colleagues who stayed when times were bleak. The strangers from the support group who became friends, allies, even business partners. The guests who wrote to me about how staying in one of my tiny houses gave them hope for their own lives. They were my circle now, my chosen people. On the anniversary of the first project's opening, I returned to the original lot. It no longer resembled the cracked ground of my humiliation. Lanterns glowed, cabins gleamed, and laughter carried across the air. Children ran beneath strings of lights. Guests clinked glasses on patios. Music drifted into the night. It was alive, vibrant, and mine. I stood in the centre of it all, tilting my head back toward the sky. The stars shone faintly above, the same stars my parents had mocked me with. But here, beneath them, was a world I had created. "They gave me an empty lot," I whispered to the night, "and I turned it into the sky itself." Applause erupted nearby, someone recognizing me and cheering, but I let the moment stay private in my chest. For once, I wasn't performing for anyone. I was simply existing, free, whole, and unbroken. And yet, as the night deepened and the lights glowed brighter, I felt the faint trace of a question tugging at me. Somewhere across town, Richard and Helen still lived, perhaps still convincing themselves they had done the right thing. Perhaps they sat in silence, weighed down by the wreckage of their choices. Did they regret it? Or were they still clinging to their illusion? The truth was, I might never know. And that was fine. Their illusion no longer trapped me. I smiled, the cool night air brushing my skin like a benediction. For the first time, I was not the Carter shadow. I was the Carter who rose.